Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today on today's webinar, Talent Readiness, the Key to Conquering the Unknowns of 2021. Our presenters today are Steve Feyer, Director of Product Marketing for Eightfold AI, and Claude Werder, SVP, Principal HCM Analyst for Brandon Hall Group. I would like to extend a thank you to Eightfold AI for sponsoring today's webinar. Eightfold is an AI company based in Silicon Valley, working with enterprises across industries and around the world. The company uses deep learning artificial intelligence technology to transform how enterprises manage their talent throughout the talent lifecycle, from recruiting and hiring through employee retention, career planning, and skills development. The company's AI approach is also designed to prevent bias and support diversity. This AI approach is transformative because it helps companies to think about talent differently. For those of you that aren't familiar with Brandon Hall Group, just a quick couple of words. We are a research and analyst firm that empowers excellence in organizations around the world through our research and tools. And also a quick mention that our Excellence Awards Spring program is now open for submissions. We have added about a dozen categories across several program areas, so be sure to visit our website for the latest. Also, your participation in our surveys is one of the most crucial components for our research. So if you have a few minutes to spare and see any topics that you would like to take a survey for, it's greatly appreciated. The links will be available in your handout, and you can always visit www.brandonhall.com. Finally, a few logistics. This presentation is being recorded. The playback and slides will be provided to everyone within 24 hours of the webinar in a follow-up email. You can also find a PDF of the slides in your handout section on your control panel. Finally, if you would like to ask a question, please do so by typing it into the question box for our presenters. And without further delay, let's turn it over to Claude to dive right in.
Well, thank you, Melissa, and thank you everyone for joining us. Hello, a belated Happy New Year to everyone. I hope everything is off to a good start for you. We are certainly hoping that everyone has a much better year than we all had in 2020. Of course, it's impossible to know what's going to happen. There's so much disruption politically with the pandemic and much more, and all of it impacts the world of work. And so today, since we don't have a crystal ball, our goal is to frame the unknowns around talent readiness specifically in 3 buckets and discuss ways to ease the challenges and forge solutions. Now, Steve and I certainly have some research and opinions, but we want you to weigh in as well throughout the webinar. So we have 4 poll questions for you today during the course of the presentation, and we'll also entertain your questions and comments as we go, as well as at the end of the webinar as time allows. So feel free to post questions and comments as they come to you. We want to try to make this really more of a conversation than just a presentation, as we all have wisdom and insights to share. So though we know there are many challenges ahead, let's get started with a poll question on what you are optimistic about for your organization in 2021. So if you could weigh in on this question, what are you most optimistic about in 2021 for your organization? Is it hiring the right talent? Is it keeping your best talent? Adjusting to new workplace realities? Growing your business? Or are you so charged up about 2021 that you're optimistic about all of these choices? So we're interested to know at the beginning kind of what your state of mind here is and what you're focused on and what you're excited about for 2021. And then we have some information from our HCM Outlook survey where we ask similar questions, and we'll kind of compare your answers to what our other study found. So Melissa, how are we doing with responses?
We're at about 70%.
Okay. Let us know when we're we're ready here.
All right, I think we can go ahead and close the poll, and I will share the results.
Okay, and so, well, that's great to see, and that would have been my prediction, that a little less than half are really optimistic about everything. It is the beginning of a new year, and you know, everybody is raring to correct the ship and move forward. So that's the dominant answer, was being optimistic about all of the above. And then between 11 and 17% were most optimistic about the other 4. So that's great to see. And so now I think we'll move on to a little bit of information just to get things started on from our Human Capital Management Outlook Survey for 2021 that Brandon Hall Group conducts every year. And in that survey, respondents, we had close to 400 respondents, were most optimistic about economic recovery from COVID-19, as well as developing new leaders and getting support from top executives to meet business objectives. And almost half were also optimistic about developing new skills in their employees and improving employee engagement. But we also asked about what concerns they had going into 2021. And respondents tended to be concerned about the logistics and the specifics of the things that they were optimistic about, especially having adequate resources and having the right technology. And so technology obviously is a critical factor here, and we're going to be talking a lot about that today. There was also some concern about the same issues that others were optimistic about, such as developing the skills of the workforce, and we're going to be delving into that as well. So on the next slide, our Outlook study also asked about the most important business and people strategies. So when it comes to people strategies, customer satisfaction was number 1, which of course is not surprising, followed by revenue generation, and also safely returning employees to on-site work, managing change, which is always vitally important, and strong communication regarding business conditions were also top of mind. And then when it came to people strategies, organizations say they are most important directly or indirectly to their top business objectives. So 7 of 10 organizations say fostering an inclusive workplace, strong leadership, and strong employee engagement are imperative. Now, in other studies, ensuring employee wellness and well-being was also a high priority. And about 2/3 of respondents believe work-life integration and controlling and hopefully preventing employee burnout are also important. So all of these people issues are critical, obviously, to address in order to satisfy customers, drive revenue, and meet those other business objectives. So between those business objectives and the people issues, organizations are dealing with a lot of uncertainties and unknowns. And while you all are generally optimistic, which is great, there are also some realistic concerns. So we thought it would be useful for discussion purposes to put those uncertainties or unknowns into 3 buckets related to talent readiness. And for that, I'll turn things over to Steve.
Thanks so much, Claude, and thank you all for joining the webinar here today. And it's really interesting to see your reactions to this poll question. And I do want to emphasize, Claude and I have some polls and some discussion today. So if you do have thoughts or questions as we go, we will stop and discuss as we go through the webinar today. But what's really strikes me about your responses to this question and the research that Claude and Brandon Hall Group have been doing is that while we're all looking ahead, that the range of concerns is really broad. And I think that really highlights why we need to think about readiness, because while we have a lot we can look forward to, we have to create our own luck to a certain degree, especially given so much of the uncertainty that we are facing for this year. And we really face a lot more uncertainty than we would have thought 1 year ago today. If we think back to that pre-COVID period, that magic 8 ball of our business lives is much cloudier than it's ever been because there's so many big questions. What's the economy going to do? Will we be mired in recession here in the US and elsewhere, or will we see a surge of recovery and growth? And how will that impact the choices we need to make as talent professionals? And how will recovery from the pandemic proceed? Will we all be getting widespread vaccines in a matter of days and start to have or return to a more normal business environment? Or is it going to be like this all year? And how are other events and changes in expectations going to affect the progress of our business? So whatever that business may be. And while I'm making reference here to events in the news, I do want to just highlight that we're not going to talk about politics today. Really maybe the impact of things that may happen in the news and how we should be prepared for that. So while the answers to these questions will be very different depending on specific factors, your industry, the size of your company, where you operate, and much else, today's presentation and discussion is really about preparing for some of these uncertainties and how you can map these ideas and topics against the specifics for your business. So you can be ready to react, respond, and be as successful as a talent leader, no matter which curveball this year is going to throw at us all. So as Claude mentioned on the next slide, there are 3 specific unknowns we do want to think about for this year. And first of all, we want to think about the employment we have and the people we have. One of the most important lessons I took away from 2020 was how quickly a company's need for talent can change, either by needing to reduce the workforce or suddenly increase the workforce. In the US, we saw businesses that needed to reduce their workforce by 6 figures of people, which is shocking, but at the same time, other businesses needed to add 6 figures worth. So whichever possibility you may encounter this year, you need to be ready for it. And whatever that reality is, you should want to use the team that you have to the greatest extent possible and potentially avoid layoffs. So that's the first big category of unknowns we want to try to address. The second big category is more directly about the pandemic itself and how it sent so many of us to work from home. And from the perspective of talent, this creates a very new challenge. A lot of work can be done remotely, and chances are you've already adjusted to some extent to this, including hiring without any in-person meeting, if you do have a remote workforce. Well, how can you make the most of this reality and make sure that you have a purposeful and successful recruiting strategy in light of the realities of a remote work world that we have? The final area of uncertainty is, if you may, perhaps a little more philosophical, but it's the reality of how this period has changed us and how it's continuing to change us, and how it's changing our expectations as it comes to work and talent. And candidly, if you don't think that this year has changed you, perhaps you're still processing that change or haven't looked in the mirror yet, because this is changing us, this experience of working from home and everything else around this. And in terms of how this is affecting our talent and how is this affecting us as talent professionals, we need to think about how this year and the year to come is changing our employees' expectations. I think that we have one very specific change that we already know about, and that then prompts us to think about what other changes we may not know about yet in terms of our employees' expectations. The flip side of this is our customers' expectations. How have our customers changed, and how do we need to respond to that as talent professionals? So these are the 3 big topics today. And as I mentioned, Claude will have poll questions for us as we keep diving in. So the first unknown is if we have the right people. If you find that you need to hire quickly, are you going to be able to do that and get the right people in? Or if you need to reduce your workforce, can you do that in the best way for your business and for your people? And the underlying way that we want to think about this approach, the underlying suggestion to be ready for this unknown is to think in terms of skills. So it's not, do I have the right people specifically, do I have Alan and Betty, Charlie and Diane? No, it's do I have the right skill? And so the challenge of 21 is going to push us to actually start to realize the vision of the skills-based workforce if it's not something we've done before. So now I want to turn it back over to Claude because I know he has the next poll question for us.
Yes, and that what we're talking about leads into our next poll question, and that's how would you rate your organization's ability to develop skills that employees will need in the near future? And that can include, of course, upskilling and reskilling. So are you extremely confident, solidly confident, somewhat concerned, or very concerned about being able to develop the skills that your employees need going forward? Interested in seeing what the consensus is here, and then we have a related question from HCM Outlook research to share and compare to what your feelings are. And then we'll move into the other areas.
Okay, and we have about half the audience is voted, so I will leave this open for just a few more seconds, give everyone an opportunity to go ahead and make a selection before we share the results.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see what folks say, because at Brandon Hall Group we're having a lot of interest in developing skills and upskilling and reskilling.
All right, we are at about 75%, so I will go ahead and get this closed. Share those results.
So about 45% of people say they're confident. I think I'm getting an echo all of a sudden. I don't know why. And 40% are somewhat concerned. So kind of middle of the road. Very few people are extremely confident, and also very few people are very concerned. So that's good. And we're going to talk a little bit more about how to go about that and the strategy to really how you can move into developing your employee skills. So we asked a similar question in our Outlook research. Specifically, we asked survey respondents to rate their confidence in the following statement: we're prepared to develop the skills required by the business in the near future. And only about 1/3 of organizations said they're prepared now to develop the skills required by the business. And I think there are many reasons for this. First is, of course, the disruptive environment that we all have been working in for the past year. Dealing with day-to-day issues is more than we can deal with sometimes, let alone assessing skill gaps and creating a strategy for filling them. In addition, even before the pandemic, most organizations really didn't have a learning strategy that was closely aligned with the current and future needs of the business. And doing this will be very important in the future. HR and the learning functions need to work hand in hand with the rest of the business to really get a good handle on the future business needs and then how to address them. And third, because employers don't always understand the skills they need, they're not necessarily hiring the right people with the right skills to be able to narrow or fill those skill gaps. And now I'll turn it back to Steve to drill down on that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Claude. So before jumping back into skills specifically, I want to think about the readiness that we have to think about in terms of the workforce we have. And we need the right skills, but we certainly also need to have the right ability to deliver those skills, namely the right number of people with those skills. And so one of the things we may encounter this year is the need to scale up our workforce very quickly. We may suddenly need more people. The best way to be ready to do this is to have your own talent network ready to go. That way you'll have talent ready to go immediately, and you're not going to depend on traditional disconnected sources of talent, some of which are shown here, which are often unreliable. They're expensive as well. And in particular, a couple of the line items shown here, past applicants and company alumni, are often not accessible. So if you're depending on new sourcing every time you need to hire, you're going to not be ready to suddenly scale up your workforce. If you can access your existing talent network, that's a strategy that's often called talent rediscovery. If you've heard that phrase, that's what I'm talking about here. Now, I do like to call this talent network because I think that can help explain the value of the strategy better to your colleagues outside of talent. Maybe that's the marketer in me, but I encourage this because I think it does make it sound more significant, and it really is. It's a significant strategy. But the other limitation about just saying talent rediscovery is that that implies you're just looking at those past applicants as the whole focus. But the reality is when you have your own talent network, you're bringing everyone here in these groups and others, however you define them, into a single talent network for hiring and engagement. You'll have one interface or technology that you can use to access all of these folks, understand who has the right skills that you're looking for, and then immediately go and recruit them. And technology can help you to do this, can give you that one access point. This network can be really very large. If you're in a large business today, this could be a really significant strategy for you. So at Eightfold, we've done some research on this, and we found that a typical business will have roughly 200 talent profiles for each employee in the business, just as a quantitative estimate. So that means if you're in a 10,000 person company today, well, 10,000 times 200 is about 2 million people. That means in theory, your 10,000 person company has a digital stack of 2 million resumes that you could recruit from. You just need to be able to access that group and find the right people as soon as you need them, because chances are within that 2 million, you can immediately do the sourcing you need. And that's going to dramatically reduce your time to fill as well as the cost in doing so, and really make you ready for this particular uncertainty. All right, so that's scaling up the workforce. But what if you are facing the opposite situation? What if you need to suddenly reduce your workforce? Which is unfortunate, but let's be honest, it does happen, and we shouldn't shy away from bad news just because we don't want to have to give people bad news. So the key here is to be ready for this possibility by enabling talent redeployment. Often in a layoff, you're going to have 30 days and at most 60 days to let each person who's affected by that layoff find a new internal option before they have to separate. Today, that often is a very manual process. There's very little support. And so not too many of the people who are impacted by a layoff are going to be able to find a new job internally. That's not ideal. You really want to make sure you can keep as many employees as possible. Because if you can find new roles for your employees whose positions are being eliminated, you're going to not only keep great skills and organizational knowledge that improves your productivity, it will also have a really nice boost for your corporate culture. You're going to show your people you care about them in the most meaningful possible way, and they will know it. They'll remember. Look, and let's also be honest, there's a cost savings as well, so it's good for the bottom line. If nothing else will convince your manager, you can tell them that. Well, the key to being able to do this, the key to being ready for talent redeployment is to know about skills. We want to know in advance what skills each person has and what skills they could quickly learn for a new role. And that's why this bullet says capabilities-based matching. The skills that someone knows today and the skills that they could easily learn to do is what I call capabilities. So a capability is something you know how to do or that you could easily learn to do. And that's the kind of matching you need to be able to do at large scale. Because many of the employees who are going to be impacted by a layoff may just need to learn one thing pretty quickly, and they have the ability to do that. They have that capability, and then they'll be a perfect fit for an open role that exists elsewhere in the business. And this has a really dramatic impact. Now, as you've probably already predicted, this type of capabilities-based matching is something we can do at Eightfold for our customers. So it's something we enable you to do. And we did have one customer that was facing the situation. They had a large layoff last year of about 3,000 total employees. With our capabilities-based artificial intelligence in place, before the layoff had to take place, they were able to redeploy much more of their talent than they expected. This is a large company. They have experience with layoffs, and they expected just about 1 in 5 of their laid off employees would be able to find a new role. That was their prior experience. But with this capabilities-based matching, they were able to triple the rate of redeployment. They were able to get 58% offers into new roles, which was a dramatic savings of staff and money as well. So we've been talking about hiring quickly and avoiding layoffs as some of this flexibility you'll need to be ready for uncertainty. And this is going to come back to that use of individual capabilities. So how can you actually make use of skills and individual capabilities? And in the poll we just took, 48% of you said that you were at least somewhat concerned about your ability to develop skills that your employees are going to need in the near future. And this illustration here shows how you can think about getting that capability. So you can move from concern to confident. The key here to being able to do this, to retrain workers, is making it individualized. You can send your entire department to go take a course, right? But you know that has a certain failure rate, and the reality is not everybody needed to take that course. What you really want to do is have flexibility so each person can move towards something new. And this is what that could look like. So let me talk you through this illustration, and it is just an illustration. It's symbolic. Suppose you have someone in a current role where the reality is that role may not be something they may need to do as much in the future. Use office manager as an example, because we may not have nearly as many people who need to manage offices in the future. But something we may have a lot more of is call center managers, because we're going to have more telephone-based service and work at home. So perhaps the office managers of 2019 can be call center managers of 2021. Well, how can they do that? You have this hypothetical office manager who has certain skills that they still will need to use as a call center manager. There are also some additional skills that they would need to learn to become a call center manager. How do we know what those skills are? You have that information in your organization today. You probably have a job architecture or something like it, and you also know what your employees can do because you have their resume when they applied for a job. All of this information can be parsed into skills. AI can help you do this. And you can understand exactly what a job requires and exactly what a person can do. So you literally can do what's illustrated here. You know what skills this person would then need to learn because you'll know what that gap is between an office manager and a call center manager for them. And then you can show them exactly what they would need to do to gain those skills. Here are courses you can take that are available from our LMS or a partner technology. Here are projects in our project marketplace or mentors who will train you or apprentice you, even events that you could attend that are involved in teaching this skill. Here's all the different options you have to learn these skills that we can offer to you that you can become a call center manager. And then you can multiply this on an individual basis by 1,000, 10,000, 100,000, however big your organization is. This is how you can then be flexible and ready for whatever these uncertainties are. Because I'm making an assumption, and maybe it's the opposite of this. Maybe everyone who's in a call center today is going to have to learn something else, but you can still take this approach. So it all does come back to skills and learnability. So that was the first big unknown is, do we have the right people? Do we have the right skills? The second big unknown we want to touch on today, the second big category of uncertainty is, gosh, when are we going to be done with this work at home? Personally, I'm frustrated by it. I love to be in person, but I know we're only here in California about halfway through working at home. So I can't wait to get back in person. But the reality is this return to normal is not going to be back to just the way things were. Not only are we going to have to go back to some sort of hybrid environment, when it comes to our work as talent professionals and recruiting, this period of time has now changed what we can do. So regardless of when we're going to be back in person, we need to be prepared to hire now and perform our talent operations now. So in order to be ready for this unknown, we should create some certainty today about what we can do to make remote recruiting as effective as possible for our businesses. But before getting into a couple of ways we can do this, I want to turn it back over to Claude to ask a poll question about this idea of returning to work.
Yes, thanks, Steve. And so a question related to when we'll be working in person again, given all the adjustments companies have made with remote work in the past year. We wanted to ask you how important it is to return as many employees as possible to on-site work as soon as possible. I've talked to many different companies who are really settling into a long-term remote work strategy. So we're interested to see how important it is to get as many people back to work as possible. So tell us if it's of critical importance to get as many people back to work as soon as possible, important, somewhat unimportant, or not at all important. Now we know, of course, that answers will vary by industry, but it's still interesting to kind of get a sense of how people are thinking about the imperative nature of on-site work versus the ability to adjust and make the most of remote work. And while you're giving us your answer, just want to encourage people to give their questions and comments on what Steve and I are talking about as we go, and we can discuss them and perhaps have kind of a conversation and back and forth. And since these are three distinct buckets we're talking about, we can deal with them as they come, as well as at the end, if you'd like. So let's, Melissa, are we ready to see what the results are?
We are just about 60%, so I'll give it just another couple seconds. Let everyone have an opportunity to answer. All right, I think we are ready to close the poll and share the results. Claude, are you able to see the results? Okay, great.
Oh, yeah.
We are. I don't hear sound on you, Claude.
I'm talking away on mute here. My apologies. So about 6 in 10 folks believe that returning to on-site work as soon as possible is really not that important. Another 40% think it is important. And in our previous research, this is kind of what we've seen as well. So now, if we look at our research from our HCM Outlook, let's turn now to talk about when organizations will try to complete their return to work plans. And there's really no consensus there. It depends on industry, their economic situations, and the relevance and effectiveness of remote work. So slightly less than half of organizations say they will position their workforce where they optimally want them by the middle of this year. And another 38% it will be the second half of the year and even well into or early next year. And then 15% are still formulating plans. And I do interviews with companies almost every day, and I think it's probably trending toward even more than 15% of organizations still formulating plans, because I think they're changing as things continue to unfold. The more they learn about the vaccine process and other things going on in the economy, I think there's still a lot of people who are trying to get a grip on when and how they're going to bring people back on site. So flexibility in workforce planning will be critical, because the pandemic is still raging, and we're not going to know for at least a few months how vaccinations will impact infections and the ability for people to safely have more face-to-face interactions. So I'll turn it back to Steve now to talk about virtual recruiting, and then we'll take a break, and we do have a couple of questions coming in, so we'll stop and talk about those. Steve?
Thanks, Claude. What really strikes me about the poll responses from all of you and your research is this great variability, but it's not reflected in conversations that I have. And I wonder if there's a bit of a filter bubble effect here within our own industries and within our own work environments where we are. We may either have this big push to return to work or this big push toward remote work. So it really is different. We all should see how different it is. And so I want to jump back into a couple of suggestions about how we can respond to this uncertainty and essentially create certainty, whatever our office requirements or culture is. I should amend that word office and say whatever our workplace requirements or workplace culture is. So one way to be more effective now in this process of recruiting as talent professionals is to accept that it's not going to just go back to the way it was. And let's make remote work a benefit now. So I want to illustrate this by thinking about how you would recruit if everyone has to work out of an office. And you see here an illustration. Suppose, just hypothetically, that you're in Chicago, Illinois, which is a wonderful city and great place to live and work. Well, if you are working in urban Chicago, you're going to be limited to hiring within a commutable range, which is roughly the red circle here. And that's 60 minutes in each direction. That has a population of, I think, about 8 or 9 million people, a total population, not just the workforce. So that's who you can recruit from to work in Chicago, maybe 8 or 9 million people. But now let's look at another option. Suppose instead that you accept that you're going to keep working remote and no longer require people to come into an office. So suddenly the range that instead of that red circle around the pin in Chicago, that red circle is now the time zones in the yellow, orange, and red shown on this map of the Americas, right? This is no longer 60 minutes commute. This is 60 minutes time zone that is equally close to this virtual office. And that increases your talent pool to a population of 250 million people, 300 million people. It's much larger. And that whole group can have the same ability to collaborate and have the same experience. But in order to open up that talent pool and that possibility, you need to be ready to recruit virtually. So you need to change your strategy for recruiting. And what I've seen is this is a bit of a rip the Band-Aid off moment. So it has to work for your workplace. It has to be for those, for those 40% of you who were saying that it's, I had the numbers wrong. It's the 60% of you who say it's somewhat unimportant or not at all important to return to the workplace. This is a way to embrace that and perhaps say we're not going to just hire in the workplace anymore. This is actually something we've done at Eightfold's marketing team. We were focused on in an office culture in the past, and instead decided as the pandemic hit, we would begin hiring anywhere where we could find the right talent. And the result has been tremendous productivity. So it really can work once we made that decision. All right, so for the 40% of you who still think it's critical to return on site, to have people come into your office, there's still ways that you can be ready to recruit and take advantage of the changes in our recruiting environment, even though you're going to be bringing everyone back. And I want to focus especially on university recruiting or early talent recruiting. So even if you're not going to have remote work, you should still think about remote recruiting or virtual recruiting, because that's now going to be part of the world that we're in. Think about it this way. If you are only recruiting in person, and before the pandemic, most university hiring was in person. So you would send your university team and they'd go to a career fair in the college gym. They've got a branded tablecloth and a bunch of glossy flyers, and students are going to stand in line and hand you their resume. And it's the way things have always been done, tried and true, but it's limited. You got limited logistics and travel time, and you can only get to a relative handful of schools. So I've talked to Fortune 500 companies about this, and what I see is based on the specific kind of talent they hire, that number is something like 20 schools, maybe less than that they actually recruit from. That's really limiting. Well, if you embrace virtual talent recruitment, even if people are going to come in person eventually, once they start to work for you, you can cover a lot more ground if you're virtual. Obviously, this is just an illustration, but you can go to a lot more places. You don't have to make a hard choice about where you can afford to recruit. You can go everywhere. You can be everywhere. Everywhere where the early talent is, you can be there just as easily. So you can take the uncertainty we're in now, change your policies and processes for early talent recruiting, and make it an opportunity, even if you're going to have this early talent come to work in your office. And I wanted to focus on university talent specifically for this reason. I think that the younger folks you're going to be wanting to bring into your organization are all very used to virtual environment, and especially in this period, they are now living in a virtual world. And so you're even connecting with them culturally by remote recruiting, even if you're going to have to bring them to a manufacturing facility or some other kind of in-person office, which is the job that they're going to do. This is about meeting them where they are so you can actually successfully recruit that talent. So I think virtual recruiting is here to stay for sure. We're going to have some in-person, but that future is in-person and virtual. And Claude, this is really interesting. What do you tell us about this?
Well, I think the bottom line is that, one degree or another, the future of work is going to be in person and virtual, as we've discussed. And it shows that about 2/3 of organizations, this is again from our HCM Outlook research, will have at least 1/4 of their workforce primarily working remotely post-COVID. So that may not sound like a lot, but it's really about 2.5 to 3 times higher than what most companies did before the pandemic. And this research was conducted last month, and I talk to HR and business leaders in corporations almost every day, and I think we can expect these numbers to fluctuate greatly over the coming months because organizations are grappling with a lot of things. They're going to have a lot of uncertainties about who they're able to recruit, and going back to the skills that we talked about, if people have the right skills. So the ability to increase their recruiting window and have a larger variety of people to choose from with a larger variety of talent and experiences is going to be, I think, increasingly attractive. And so I think we're going to see a continual shift. So that leads to the question of how we move forward, Steve, with so many unknowns. And I think we've got a couple questions coming in, but a couple of them are about skills, which we talked about earlier. So I think we're just going to go ahead with the next section, and then we'll handle questions at the end.
Yeah.
So Steve, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Claude. I love the questions about skills. So please stay on the line. We'll address them at the end. I'd love to come back to that topic. I did want to talk, though, about this one last key unknown, which is how we're going to deal with how this period is changing us and how that's going to affect us at work, and how it's going to affect how we attract talent and keep talent, given these changes in our expectations, and really focusing on two perspectives. One is how our employees' expectations have changed about their work environment, about their companies, about their employer, and how our customers' expectations have changed. And we bring that right back to skills, what skills we would need to service our customers. So when it comes to employee expectations, we're still all looking in the mirror, right? We're all still trying to understand what has changed and how that's going to change what we want from our jobs and what we expect from our employers. There's one area, though, where based on research, Claude, that you and I have looked at from Brandon Hall Group and so many other places, there's one employee expectation that has overwhelmingly changed here in the United States. And that is based on diversity, equity, and inclusion. The social justice movement that was galvanized by the murder of George Floyd in the spring of 2020 has dramatically changed employee expectations. And I said earlier, we're not talking about politics. That's not a political opinion. That's just the results that we're seeing from surveys. And that's the results we're seeing from leadership teams, investors, everybody is saying that this DE&I is now what matters for employees. So this is not about your opinion. This is about what you may want to do if you want to attract top talent, because if you don't address DE&I in a way that's going to work for your employees, you're going to struggle to attract the majority of the people who might be available to work for you. So this is a new certainty for 2021. Perhaps the uncertainty in this part is how you address it. And in order to try to mitigate some of that uncertainty, you do have some specific suggestions. So first, in terms of addressing diversity, especially at the point of hire, one policy I'd suggest you consider is anonymous screening. You've seen for a couple minutes here what this looks like. Anonymous screening means removing any personally identifiable information from a resume or digital profile before considering that person. So you only look at skills and qualifications. And this has been proven again by many pieces of research to reduce bias that then results in greater diversity at the point of hire. This is also called candidate masking. So you may see this called two different things. So in terms of other policy, there's also this question of equity. What do you do to create purposeful action toward a level playing field, such as affirmative action policy? And this is a big topic. There may be different policies that are right for your business for many different reasons. Whatever you're going to do, though, you're going to get asked questions about this. And this is something your employees are going to demand meaningful answers on in order to work for you. So ask yourself if your organization, whatever you're doing, has the right level of transparency around your hiring practices. So whatever equity policies your company is pursuing, ask how transparent you need to be, and if you have the right level of transparency, so that you not only can measure the results of those practices, you can also show your internal workforce and external stakeholders, here is why we chose to pursue this policy, and here's the results that we're seeing. So you need to have some sort of analytics policy in place in order to do this. And this is a way to create some of that certainty around this expectation that's there. Finally, we talked about DE&I, and the I there is for inclusion. And so in terms of inclusion, you want to examine if you have the right tools in place to make sure that all of your current employees have a fair and equal access to opportunity. Inclusion is a big topic in terms of feelings of belonging. I'm not going to get into belonging today, but it's more important in terms of career development to think about promotion, job transfer opportunities, special opportunities. These need to be available to everybody, regardless of their personal background. One of the best ways to make that possible is to put all of the career planning and opportunity availability into a self-service framework so that each individual has the same access to these opportunities and can see why an opportunity is available to them or not. So that you then have this building of trust. An employee sees, all right, I am not available to apply for this promotion now because I don't meet the qualifications, rather than I was not promoted because, well, of my personal characteristics. You start to create a period of trust. So this is a certainty. This is something which in 2021, your employees and your candidates are going to start demanding of you. And here are some ways that you can start to meet this in order to create more certainty going forward. But there are definitely uncertainties as well. And I want to turn it back over to Claude for the last poll question to see what you all think about some of these questions of what employees are going to expect now.
Sure. So our final poll question talks about, or asks you, what you think are the most important the thing that is most important to employees now as they adjust to their new reality. Is it flexibility in the workplace and in scheduling between on-site and remote work? Is it having a range of career advancement opportunities? Is it alignment with the values and mission of the employer? Is it, in fact, a diverse and inclusive work environment? Or do you think it's all of the above equally, that employees find all of these things to be equally imperative? And as you're answering, I just want to underscore what Steve was saying is, you know, the advent of the importance of DE&I is really kind of overwhelming. We ask a question every year about the importance of DE&I in terms of business success, business priorities. And over the last few years, it's always been in the top 10 in terms of business strategies. But this year, it was number one. Number one. It's just an astounding increase in the level of importance that business leaders are placing on this now. So I think that this is, if you're not already focusing on this, which I know from my own research that a lot of employers are, this is something you really got to take a good look at. So Melissa, how are we doing on results here?
We're doing pretty well. Let's just leave it open for a couple more seconds. For those of you who haven't answered, please take this opportunity to take the quick poll. This is the last poll of the presentation. All right, go ahead and close and share those results.
Yeah, so 44% say all of these things are of equal importance. And then among the other answers, the flexibility in scheduling is the most important for those who did not think they were equal. And we've gotten a lot of feedback in our research, in our advisory work about flexibility as well. And I know a lot of organizations are grappling between, you know, do we give them X number of days that they can work in the office or work at home or entirely at home, or maybe do it by week and just bring people in for team meetings. There's a lot of variables that organizations are grappling with in terms of flexibility. So Steve, I'll turn it back over to you to finish out.
Well, thanks so much, Claude. It's very interesting to see that flexibility is the number one most mentioned item here, and also that many of you see that a lot of these are all equally important. And I want to take away from that they may be equally important, but it may be that we're just not sure which is actually going to matter. And this is going to be different based on your workforce. You know, I said this isn't about politics today, so perhaps your workforce is not as concerned about a diverse and inclusive work environment, but a different workforce that is very important, and that's fine. You need to understand your workforce. You just want to think about the flexibility. What we're revising today is be ready for flexibility there. And these are some of the other ways in which you want to think about flexibility. I've asserted that the DE&I topic is definitely something that workforces need. I think we're still learning more about what workforces want in terms of some of these other expectations shown here, such as in-person or remote work and flexibility there. Will you allow your workforce now something like a 3-2-2 arrangement? Is that something that's going to matter in attracting talent? I think we don't know yet, and it's going to depend on your industry. Similar to that's maybe an obvious one. More, maybe less obvious is full-time versus flexible work arrangements. Coming out of the pandemic, are you going to want to offer the ability to switch from a full-time to other kinds of arrangements and switch back? This is often not something that employers have enabled for their employees. If you're hired full-time, you're full-time. If you're hired contract or part-time, that's the role that you're in. But it may be that you're able to keep talent and attract talent in a better way if you are able to add that flexibility. That may become something important. And the first one listed on the right here, just something that I think about a lot, and I don't know that we have any real answer to yet either, is this question of long-term opportunity versus a short-term opportunity. Prior to the pandemic, one of the biggest topics in recruitment that I spoke to our customers about was job hopping. There's all this concern about spending a lot of money to recruit someone who's just going to work for you for 18 months. Well, this short-term income and short-term optimizing of opportunity may not be what your top talent is looking for anymore. It may be that the same people who were most interested in switching jobs every 2 years coming out of the pandemic are really going to look for an employer who gives them comfort that they have a long-term opportunity for 5 or more years. That could be a key to attracting talent. I'm sure there's other topics that you have in mind. If you have other thoughts, we'd love to hear them. Just one more slide, and I would love to take a couple of questions, starting with the question about skills, because that's what it comes back to when we think about what our customers are looking for. And I think this really ties back this whole question about uncertainty and how we need to think about this year. Creating a focus on skills in our talent operations is going to be key to being ready for these uncertainties that 2021 is going to keep throwing at us. It's not just what our customers want, but that's a big part of it. Our customers may have different demands as well. And the way to be sure that we have the right people in place, that we have the right skills in our workforce, is to have some ability to look around the corner, to have some ability to benchmark, and to have some access to that information in real time. Thinking about getting a real-time benchmarking as opposed to 3 or 6 month projects for benchmarking is going to help you be ready to understand what your business needs to succeed, so that you don't discover that you're out of sync or out of step due to a bad quarterly report. Then it's too late, because things are going to move very quickly. So if you are starting to focus on a skills mindset and having this ability to start to look at the skills that you need to service your customers, you're also going to be in much better position to start to recruit for skills and start to redeploy talent for skills and start to enable skills development among your workforce. You're going to be in position to starting to do all of the things that you need to do in order to be ready for this crazy year that we're all living in. Well, I'd love to address a couple of questions with you, Claude. Can we start with the first one here that we saw, Claude?
Absolutely. I'll go
Sure.
ahead and read it for both of you.
Okay.
How would you recommend in a practical way that we keep skills clusters accurate and relevant to roles in a timeous manner? I have found this tricky as the scale of roles makes this very difficult to maintain for an entire organization where the HR headcount to responsibilities is stretched.
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's a question I hear from customers a lot. Companies with tens of thousands of employees have unwieldy job architectures in many cases. They may have thousands of unique job descriptions. And that's very hard to maintain. This is where artificial intelligence can really help you out, because a good AI technology can understand the skills in that job architecture library and has a self-adjusting library that lives behind it. I would call that a matrix of capability that lives behind it. So that AI can tell you, here are the skills based on what you've written in the past that you actually require for these jobs. And also here's the skills that people in your workforce have or in your pool of talent, so that you can start to do that matching and make those updates to your architecture based on that understanding of skills. And then you don't have to keep skill clusters up to date yourself. That's going to be handled for you by the technology.
Yeah, I would agree that AI is almost, it's absolutely critical to use it. It's really the only way, especially for large employers, that you can manage the situation. But the other non-technology thing, and we hear this all the time from our customers, that really needs to improve in addition to leveraging the best technology, is really that the learning and the HR function needs to really be joined at the hip with the business function in terms of what the priorities are for fulfilling jobs, for the skills that are needed. And that is going to change quite a bit, obviously, as time goes on and economic results change. And so there needs to be a lot more collaboration between the business and the HR team to understand which way the wind's blowing, so to speak, and then leveraging that technology to get the people and get the right skills in the right places at the right time.
Great. The second one is a statement rather than a question. Going back to our diversity, equity, and inclusion slide, someone made a comment. An equity statement is key. Thank you for mentioning this. It's important for investors and funders as well, in case you all wanted to add any comments to that.
Yeah, I'll take it first, and then Steve can weigh in. Equity is a piece that I think that hasn't been as upfront as the diversity and inclusion piece, and we've seen far more organizations focusing on this over the last several months. And I think that the other thing we're seeing overall is organizations understanding that not only business leaders and HR folks need to be focused on DE&I, but the entire employee base needs to understand what it takes to have a diverse, equitable, and inclusive work environment. And so we're hearing a lot of requests for education of the entire employee base on DE&I issues, and we are in fact building a certification program for organizations. So I think equity is one of the issues that I think probably needs the more education at this point than diversity and inclusion, and organizations are trying to find their way to make sure the entire workforce is up to speed on how everyone can work together and collaborate to have a great environment of DE&I. Steve, any final comments before we wrap up for the day?
Yeah, I would just add on that point, Claude, that the suggestions for ways to be ready don't assume any specific policy for your business. So whatever is right for your business, for your industry, and for your employees, you do want to be preventing bias. You do want to be doing the things that you actually need to do, so that you're not. It's not going to assume any specific opinion based on the part of your employer base or your employees.
Great. Thank you for that last point. And thank you for participating and sponsoring the webinar today, Steve. I've really enjoyed it, as always. I hope all of you have, and you've gotten something from it, and it helps you as you're setting your course for the year. So thanks again to Eightfold, and thanks to all of you for taking time out of your busy days. And we look forward to seeing you in another webinar very soon. Thank you. Have a great year, have a great week, and we'll see you all soon. Bye-bye.